Greetings, dear viewers. Anthony Mars Jr. on PR Lost of Galaxy 2014, but now known as Power Rangers Lost of Galaxy fan film. And welcome to my return to the Terra podcast with Terra podcast episode 321, presented by my Morphin Megaverse Power Rangers Facebook group. Haven't joined it? Check it out now. And welcome to the first PR Lost of Galaxy 2014 / Terra podcast in 3 years and of 2021. And Happy New Year, everybody, even though it feels a little too late now since it's already on to February at the time I recorded this originally. It's been 3 years since I last did this video series. 3 years. And this video is not going to be a general specific topic, whether it be with all the stuff that's happening now. But ever since in the 3 years since I last did this video series, I had dropped the ball on not posting much as usual with this because I knew that if I did this video series again, I'm afraid I would probably just not want to do it again, but I have to do it again because this is what was the strength of my channel. If it weren't for this video series, I would have never gotten this far onto YouTube today. And I want to kickstart this revival of PR Lost of Galaxy 2014's video commentaries with a season 7, I think. Season 7, season 6, something like that. Because when I started this video series, this Power Ranger podcast, when it went through different name changes and name stages over the last, now, I would say 8 years now, because I didn't do any podcasts in 2019 or last year because, again, my original video series for this had already came to an end right around the last episode, that being my Power Morphicon 2018 rant. So in this episode, the titled just simply Return of the Podcast, kind of like, Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, but it's kind of like, this is what this video is, Return of the Podcast. But by the time I made this video, I want to address to everyone, for newer viewers, and if there's any of my old ones still out there doing anything else now, I just want everyone else to know about some major changes going forward, starting with this video. For starters, I want to take this episode of the podcast, my Power Ranger podcast, pretty seriously, because in the 3 years since I last did this podcast, in the last 3 years I've did this podcast, stop doing it, I decided to I had some ultimatum about should I stop doing this altogether, or probably just take some time off and figure some ways to do better with this podcast. And I've been thinking about it ever since late last year, if you remember from the video, the video update about what's going on with the channel, state of the channel, what's going on out in the world. There is a lot I need to catch up on for a little bit before I talk about the main topic since the last I've did this podcast. So when I last did this podcast video series of Power Rangers on PR Lost of Galaxy 2014, the last podcast was, of course, my Power Morphicon 2018 news video, which was the last episode of the video series, this particular video series. And when I stopped, I kind of went in the dark to realize that if anyone remembered any of my recent videos in passing since 2 years ago, 2019, I said that I was going to leave the past behind and leave anything I said in the past behind. Because knowing that, of course, anything I said back in the past would haunt me later on in the future and in the present. And I realized that some of the statements and stuff I've said since all of those videos, I was coming off very negative, in which I will bring up in the 5 reasons why I stopped my podcast series and why I want to do better going forward with season 7. And so much had happened after I did this podcast series. So last I recall, when I last did this video series, we were in the final year of the Neo Saban era of Power Rangers with Super Ninja Steel And at the same time, we had Power Rangers' 25th anniversary in 2018. And we had, you know, so much 20th anniversary stuff going on, and as well as things that were ending an era. Like Saban no longer doing the show anymore. And again, I think after all of the ranting, the negative ranting I've done, this is where we are now in the fandom. Not that I want to see Saban, not that I want Saban back or anything. I guess, well, I was, in the past, was one of those fans, which I'll get to when I get to my first tangent of this podcast episode, that was wanting change because, you know, again, some of us fans were just not feeling where we were at a certain time and a certain moment in our lives at the time, like me, of course. And Hasbro had already bought the franchise for $522 million. More than when Saban, you know, bought the franchise of Power Rangers back from Disney for the amount that Saban reacquisite, was it the word? Actually, reacquisite the word in terms of buying that franchise back from Disney. And then Bandai is no longer out of the picture, of course. But in the 2 years since I had stopped before this point with the video series, what had happened since then? Hasbro's era had begun with Power Rangers starting mainly in 2019, since 2019 was just now 2 years ago. Bandai's license of Power Rangers had lasted up until the end of March of 2019, and by April 1st, even though that's usually April Fool's Day of 2019, there was no April Fool's joke that Bandai's contract with Power Rangers had already ended by then, and Hasbro had fully began putting out their products of Power Rangers with Beast Morphers' toy line and the first 2 waves of the Lightning collection. And then the Boom Studio Comics was still going on with several other comic arcs that happened post Shattered Grid. Oh yeah, Power Rangers Shattered Grid happened in the comics, but again, I'll talk about the comics another time. And then Battle for the Grid, the video game, happened in 2019 for the major consoles plus PC, and several other things that happened in 2019. Okay, 2020, we were, okay, for Power Rangers, Beast Morpher Season 2 happened, plus the return of the original Red Ranger, you know, Jason, you know, for the Beast Morphers Dino Ranger team up. Well, I'll talk about some of that when I do some Beast Morphers series review on this podcast later, when I ever do get around finishing up Beast Morphers. I did, yes, of course, binge watched Power Rangers Beast Morphers during the 2.5 years since I stopped watching the video series. And when Hasbro got Power Rangers from Saban and Bandai's license of Power Rangers, you know Hasbro's toy license to Power Rangers from Bandai, I got back into the franchise, but I was already like one and done with this podcast, but something made me want to come back to do this video series in a more positive light than as opposed to, you know, how negative I was. Then the Boom Studio Comics, the mainline Mighty Morphin Power Ranger comics came to an end sometime last year in 2020, and they just now started new Power Ranger comics, Mighty Morphin and Power Rangers, but I'll again delve into that if I will get around doing anything disgusting about the comics, since I know a lot of Power Ranger fans have been hooked on the comics, and I'm like, you know, how I was, you know, in the past, but then again. And then we had more and more Lightning Collection toys and Beast Morphers Season 2. Then the Sentai that I have not delved onto since post-Q Ranger in 2017. The dinosaur-themed Rue Soldier Sentai has now been trademarked as Power Rangers Dino Fury. And of course, you know, what's going on out in the world where we are right now currently at this moment. And what I mean by ultimatum with this, bringing back this video series that I had laid dormant for the last nearly 3 years, I wanted to talk about some things why I stopped. Because there were some things I wanted to bring up and some things I wanted to make some changes. Because when I originally did this video series, and knowing the fact my videos are unscripted, of course, except fan films, and because I have scripts for those, and some re-recordings of old videos I did in the past that a lot of people didn't see when I first originally uploaded them. But with something like this that's unscripted, even my toy reviews are unscripted, and my top 10 videos are unscripted. Everything I said back in 2013 to 2018, I was very, very negative. And this is what brings up the point of the 5 reasons why I stopped doing the podcast. This Power Ranger podcast, bringing up everything Power Rangers, Sentai, and whatever goes on in the fandom. And as Terra Ventura right now at this state, well, as of my fan film thing of Power Rangers Lost Galaxy, spoiler alert, I'm in the Lost Galaxy. And basically stuck in the Lost Galaxy while in the dark and not telling everyone what's happening. But what's been going on within the fandom. And what's been going on with Sentai, what had been going on with Power Rangers, and what's been going on with me outside of all of this. So basically, in the last 2.5 years, going on 3, since I stopped doing this, I had drifted in a lost galaxy far, far away and deep in space. And basically, that's how I was with this podcast. And I pretty much drifted away from the fandom. I had began withdrawing from things and withdrawing from all of the recent news that happened over the last 3 years since I stopped doing this. And a lot had changed since the last 3 years since I stopped doing this video series, but I want to get back to it a bit. And if anyone is interested in this run of the videos, then I'll keep on going. And I realized that some of the things I was saying in the past, I pissed people off, and I realized I was not bright in the head as a Power Rangers fan. Because I wrote down 5 reasons on a piece of paper, 5 reasons why I stopped doing my podcast series before I started recording this and uploading this onto YouTube and wherever else anyone's watching this or hearing. And there was so much I said, back in 2013 to 2018. Well, I didn't start being super negative and insensitive until after Megaforce. And when we had Dino Charge and up to Super Ninja Steel, I was very cynical and I was very negative. So when I bring up this first reason why I stopped doing this podcast is, of course, the negativity. Because my negativity was so toxic. I was such a careless jerk of a Power Ranger fan running a podcast on this channel, and if I'm even hosting it elsewhere. Because when millions of other fans of Power Rangers were into something like the Neo Saban era or anything that Power Rangers had put out over the last recent couple of years, post Super Megaforce, and when we had Dino Charge and Ninja Steel, the movie, and Shattered Grid and the comics and stuff, I really was very cynical about how things were going. And also my negative attitude also was a fact of this, because again, I was going through, like anybody during the last decade. Yeah, the 2010s was what it was, and I wouldn't say it was the best decade of my life, because right now at the time I'm recording this, I'm 28, and come September this year I'll be 29 years old. My final year in my 20s. Because when I started this stuff back in my early 20s in 2013 and 2013 at age 20 to 21, I didn't know where to begin, because you know how it is when you start something in the beginning, you have to figure out where things are going. And when in some years' time, in days, a month's time, you get accustomed and adjust to it and figure an identity. So what I have been going through the whole entire time I've been on this channel, and the entire time I've been in the Power Rangers fandom community with this, I was personally going through an identity crisis. Whether if I'm a Power Ranger fan who rather do fan films, or a Power Ranger fan who wants to do anything he can think of before figuring out the one thing I should rather stick to, like a podcast, a bunch of reviews, or top 10 video kind of thing, or vlogs about the franchise or whatever. Anything that comes to mind. Because when I started this channel on YouTube, and when I was still having that negative attitude that I've had for so long, I was conflicting over what this channel was supposed to be. Because when I started this channel back in 2012, after I had discontinued my original channel, Anthony Marsh 1, I originally was supposed to do this as a channel dedicated to a fan film to one of my favorite seasons of Power Rangers. But that was because I was acting, well, when I get to the fourth tangent in this, my sense of entitlement as a fan, and being nostalgic over an older season over the newer seasons that had came along over time. But as time went on, when that wasn't working out, then I started acting all toxic and entitled and insecure and very negative, to the point that's why I was losing subscribers in the past. And I was saying so much of that negative stuff, it really drove a lot of people away. And there were some things I was saying that pissed off certain viewers, and why I had basically was coming off a bit too harsh. And yeah, the stuff I said about the Neo Saban era was harsh, but even with Hasbro owning Power Rangers, but that's why I said I want to leave the past behind. I think with it being already now 10 years since, the first season of the Neo era, Power Ranger Samurai, since 2021 is 10 years later, since 2011. And again, when I started joining the Power Rangers fandom around the time, starting via the Ranger Wiki, and even YouTube. And I was trying to figure out where I would find my place in the fandom, but I didn't know where. I didn't attend conventions like Power Morphicon or Ranger Stop to meet other fans or meet Power Ranger actors that have been on the show and movies over the nearly 30 years at the time. But back then the franchise was still relatively young in its ripe and fresh 20s at the time. But now that Power Rangers is pushing 30, same as Power Rangers is just as old as me and anyone else who's a 90s kid and older. But it appeals to all ages and all generations. But I was very negative toward the Neo Saban era, but I still don't like some of the things it still did. But there's some things I need to open up now, years later, and realizing that, yes, those seasons have happened. And yes, the 2017 movie, outside of it, though it's not canonical to the entire franchise because it was its own entity, is part of Power Rangers. The Boom Studio Comics is part of Power Rangers, but it's its own separate void. Everything else that had happened, like Hyperforce, and I'll probably do a video on Hyperforce eventually in this season of the podcast, because there's a lot I need to catch up on, because there's a lot of stuff I didn't bring up after I stopped this. And I was very negative toward some of the things that had come out, but yet all that stuff is official. The recent seasons before Hasbro and Beast Morphers and Dino Fury, Bandai's final wave of toys for the decade up until Super Ninja Steel, and was left of their Legacy line with Mighty Morphin Legacy and the Legacy Collection in general. The Boom Studio Comics at the time with the first 39 issues before Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. This is a big changing point issue saga with Shattered Grid and several other stuff post Shattered Grid, like Beyond the Grid and other one-shot stories and stuff with the comics and so forth. The crossovers with Justice League and the Ninja Turtles recently. Yeah, there was just so much that I was negative about, because I was so much about my main magnum opus here. Not just the podcast, but my fan film based on my favorite Power Ranger season, featuring a Red Ranger to represent that season, with an image of his standalone Lightning collection figure from this recent wave. So yeah, there was a lot that I said that was negative. And maybe I need to open up on the Neo Saban era a little more. Because since that, I mean, yeah, I guess I have to cut back, I gotta cut the Neo Saban era some slack. Because I realized there are many fans out there that I've noticed that actually like the Neo Saban era. But the reason why I didn't like it, and I'm saying it from my perspective, and this is, you know, again, my show, so I have to say what I want. But of course, you know, but the thing was, I was very negative, much like anyone who hated the era, but we still don't like the era for some things, but we have to appreciate the fact that Samurai, Megaforce, Dino Charge, and Ninja Steel are part of Power Rangers. Even though Dino Charge, as is now confirmed as a Super Ninja Steel in Dimensions in Danger, that Dino Charge, like RPM, takes place in another dimension, much like RPM, while all the Power Rangers from Mighty Morphin through in between gaps between Jungle Fury to Megaforce to Ninja Steel and Beast Morphers, that RPM and Dino Charge are in their own continuities. But they're still part of the prime universe of the franchise, aka the television show. Turbo movie notwithstanding, since that is also the only Power Rangers movie that's canon to the show. But I gotta realize that maybe if there's something that Power Rangers had put out when Saban and Bandai both were in charge of their respective businesses and with the franchise, if there was some things that they didn't like, then maybe I shouldn't, you know, I don't have to like what they put out. And realizing that, well, but then why would I go ahead and spend my time and waste so much time and energy every few videos and rant and rave about it? Because I realized doing all of that makes me feel like a bad person. It makes me a bad YouTuber and a bad Power Ranger YouTuber at that. And that's why I stopped doing this for a while, because that negative attitude I had was so negative. That's probably why I wasn't getting nowhere on YouTube earlier, because that's why I'm only bringing this up. I'm not saying it's just to be rude and negative. Oh, I'm back and badder than ever. I'm ruder. No. That's not the point. But I just wanted to reveal why I stopped this and why I want to come back and do this over with a new string of videos for this video series. But be more positive, and stop being, and be fair with the opinion. I you know, some of the opinions I put out. And then if there's some things I do like. If there's some things I don't like or find objectionable, then I will discuss it. But I have to take it more serious and not try to be how I was when I was in my early 20s, because again, I was trying to figure out who I was as a Power Rangers YouTuber and as a YouTuber in general, what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Because throughout my entire 20s, I've been trying to figure out what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be. And that's why I did this video series. My next point, the second reason why I stopped doing my podcast video series of Power Rangers, that being the Terra Adventure podcast. I think the things, like I said, based on, you know, tied to the first tangent, but this is tangent number 2 we're talking. I was saying some hate speech towards Saban, Nickelodeon, Bandai America, and Lionsgate when they were in control of that movie and the DVD distribution rights to Samurai and Ninja Steel. Because I wanted to say this a long time ago, for the last 3 years, after I had slowed down, following my prolonged slowdown on YouTube, and why I have been slowing down less than making videos as often. I was saying some very spiteful, hateful stuff about the Neo Saban era, Saban brands, not Hasbro, Bandai, Nickelodeon, which currently airs Power Rangers, since we're in our 10th year with Power Rangers on Nickelodeon since Samurai. Now Dino Fury is coming out at the time, as I heard. And yes, I've heard of Power Rangers Dino Fury, and it's coming out soon, or probably this month or next month, maybe, I don't know. But backtrack to 2018 when I last did this video series, and in other videos I did before I stopped the stuff I was doing, cut the crap. Basically, I was saying that hate the Neo Saban era and saying things like I hate Ninja Steel and all that stuff like that. And I think there was a reason why, thinking back to that April 20th copyright massacre, Saban copyright massacre back in April 2018 to the following Power Ranger YouTube channels like myself and Power Ranger YouTubers like Mr. Weenie, John and Mr. Weenie Productions, and some other Power Ranger YouTubers like myself. And when I knew that I was going to get viscerally attacked by Saban for my ranting, my recent videos and older videos before I started this channel, and even half of if not all of my Power Rangers fan film videos also got flagged by copyright by Saban. So I knew Saban was going to find some of that eventually, and then also then when they copyright claimed nearly, if not all of my videos almost. I think the reason why Saban did that back in 2018, I know he did this. I mean, Saban did this before in 2014 when Super Mega Force was on, but when we had Super Ninja Steel 3 years ago in the 25th anniversary, I think there were a couple of us Power Ranger fans, and knowing I was one of those in that minority that was saying a bunch of hateful stuff about what Power Rangers had been doing in the last couple of years. Even in the next 4 years after Super Mega Force, some of us had went back to talking all that crap. And I think what all of those copyright claims that I felt was false flags, and I think maybe those copyright claims were for a reason. Maybe I needed to cut the hate speech, stop talking negative about what Power Rangers was doing and what Saban is trying to do with the brand, just because if there was something I didn't like with what they did with Samurai through Super Ninja Steel, then maybe I shouldn't watch those seasons. But I did anyway because, again, I'm a Power Rangers fan. I wanted to, get into whatever it was doing. But if I find something objectionable, and I know that the criticism, fans like me was spewing out was kind of like hate speech. And even if you go back to my Nickelodeon Sucks video, it came off a bit hateful too, because knowing the fact is I just gotten older, and I gotta realize I'm never going to see my days of being a kid again. Because when I was a kid, Power Rangers back in the 90s and 2000s wasn't on Nickelodeon. It was on Fox Kids from 1993 to mid 2002. The Disney stations from ABC, ABC Kids, ABC Family, Jetix, etc. from 2002 up until 2010, and here we are 2011 to today, Nickelodeon and Nicktoon and Netflix for all streaming of all the seasons, but in the DVDs from Shout Factory and Lionsgate. But the thing is, I was saying some really spiteful stuff about Nickelodeon and how they're, how fans like me just didn't like the business practice that they've been doing with Power Rangers, with doing 2-year seasons. And maybe I need to adjust to the fact that, well, if this is how Power Rangers operates for the TV show now, this is what it is. So I have to understand and accept that. And because then there was a reason why I had to stop watching the show after Dino Charge, because knowing the fact that, okay, if Power Rangers with Ninja Steel and Beast Morphers and Dino Fury, well, Dino Fury hasn't started yet at the time of this, but with every new season happening every 2 years, when the series is once a new season is over, even if it's been a 2-year-long prolonged period, then I'll just wait until when the show is done for this new season is done for every 2 years, and just watch the series and see how it did. But it's just back when I used to have cable or satellite TV service. I had satellite, actually, by the way, mind you. Back when Samurai through early Dino Charge was on, when I had satellite, DirecTV at the time, I was bitching and complaining about why do they have to prolong these newer seasons. Because it's part of the contract that, because due to the fact Nickelodeon is a cable network and a children's cable network, they have to prolong their shows for as long as they have to. Because you know how Nickelodeon is compared to, let's say, other cable networks and other type of networks in general based on their practices with certain shows. So due to the fact I have to accept and realize that the days of having 50 episode, 40 episode seasons for a whole year is over. And on the final Power Ranger series that did that was RPM, which was 32 episodes. But I digress. But when we started with Samurai all the way to today with Dino Fury, we're still going to do the 2-season, 20 episode policy. But I have to understand that it's what Power Rangers does now. And I got to realize that maybe when Samurai and them started and when those seasons started to air and I was about to get out of high school and onto adulthood, then I don't have to watch those seasons. But I had to because, again, knowing the fact I had been deprived of some Power Ranger content in 2009 and 2010 because due to the fact that when Jungle Fury aired and when it finished, when Jetix came to an end in the beginning of 2009, Power Rangers RPM was supposed to be on Jetix, but when Disney did what they did with RPM and shuffled its time slot and so forth, and when RPM finished, Disney called quits on Power Rangers, and look where we are now with the Neo Saban era and the Hasbro era. So that would explain all of that negativity I was spewing on YouTube and in comment section on Facebook about some things about it, Instagram, and not much on Twitter because I barely use my Twitter. I do have a Twitter account, but I barely ever talk about Power Rangers much on Twitter or tweet about how much I hate the Neo Saban era or I hate the 2-season thing they're doing with it and stuff. But I gotta realize I have to accept it now. And then the stuff with Bandai America. Since Bandai is no longer with Power Rangers anymore, and we got Hasbro, but part of me kind of does miss Bandai a little bit. And I gotta realize that Bandai, in the last 8 years they had the license before turning over before the change over to Hasbro, Bandai decided not to do no more Power Rangers, so Hasbro got the franchise, and look where we are now with that, with the toy front. I really need to cut back some slack on the stuff that Bandai had put out with the Zord Builder stuff and the Legacy line, the Mighty Morphin Legacy line, and how much MMPR stuff they've been putting out. Even with Hasbro owning Power Rangers now, because I gotta understand and realize that Mighty Morphin is the golden goose of Power Rangers. Even though I have an image of a Lost Galaxy Ranger on here, but if I switch it to a Mighty Morphin, that's more accurate, but again with MMPR, because MMPR is more popular. And there's another hidden tangent I need to bring up. Whenever I do bring up about, a particular part of the franchise, the more iconic and more recognizable part, I've had some complaints about how people got on me for ripping on MMPR in recent years. Because our generation of the 90s, last decade had turned 20, but now us 90s kids and everything from the 90s is now 30. So, I have to realize that when I turned 20 and when everything from my generation turned 20 also, when it came to things that were popular in the 2 to 3 decades before this point, like Power Rangers with Mighty Morphin, I gotta realize Mighty Morphin is the original, it's the classic, it's the iconic. And yeah, there were some podcasts I've done in this video series in the past, which I had to delete, where I did said things like, I hate Tommy as the Green Ranger, or I hate Rita Repulsa. And I said some things like that in those videos. And I did do centric videos about Tommy as the Green Ranger and how nowadays in the fandom, such and such, blah, 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 Green Ranger is overrated, blah, blah, blah. I gotta accept that, realizing that green was Tommy's original color. And I have to respect that. And as for Rita Repulsa, yeah, sure, there's other female villains and villains in general in Power Rangers after Rita, like Divatox and Rancic and Venjix and Master Org and Mesogog, but I have to realize in villains like Astronema and Madame Odious and Evox recently and whoever the villains of Dino Fury will be, but I have to realize that Rita Repulsa and even her husband and Emperor of All Evil Lord Zed came first. So I have to respect that Rita and Lord Zed are the original and iconic badasses of the Power Rangers franchise. Because MMPR is going to sell more than any other series. So I realized during my 20s when I did this, since my 20s will be over come next year because I'll be turning the big 3-0. I had been very cynical about the MMPR overexposure nowadays in the comics, that 2017 movie, that Power/Rangers short film, the Neo Saban era. Whenever I hear the theme song of Power Rangers nowadays doing rehashes of Go-Go Power Rangers, and then the Rangers got it for the morph sequences, they got to yell out "It's morphin' time," and several other homagings that these newer seasons have been doing lately to MMPR, like Ninja Steel having Victor and Monty being Bulk and Skull of their season, and Samurai having Skull's son Spike, and then Bulk being Spike's uncle, and then all the other homages that the Neo Saban and currently the Hasbro era has been doing lately. But you have to understand that's why everything needs to go somewhat back to basics, but of course it's not going to be the same. And I need to accept and realize that, you know, whatever Power Rangers does today, that's fine, that's great. Because, you know, the seasons pre Neo Saban onward and post MMPR onward, and when I mean by post MMPR up to pre Samurai onward, I'm talking about the seasons that I loved so much, including a few seasons I didn't like in between that half, like that portion of the franchise, like Mystic Force and Operation Overdrive. But I do like Zeo, Turbo, In Space, of course, Lost Galaxy, Lightspeed Rescue, Time Force, Wild Force, Ninja Storm, Dino Thunder, SPD. Between Mystic Force and Overdrive, Jungle Fury, and of course RPM. Between that portion of Power Rangers, post MMPR, pre Neo Saban onward. I was acting a bit too biased over the fact that I was acting a bit hateful, like again, tying back to my first tangent, how I was like, the older seasons for my generation was so much better than these newer Power Rangers. So I was like, I need to shut the hell up, because, and I realized, you know, yeah, I have to realize I just became an adult now. I'm grown up now. And I had my time with Power Rangers, but I still enjoy the franchise. I don't hate Power Rangers, or even in the extent of Super Sentai as well. I like both franchises, but there were some things I just didn't like out of the Neo Saban era, like the Legendary Battle, and also Clash of the Red Rangers, Gosei as a mentor, and several other factors that those seasons did. But nevertheless, there were still some things I did like about the Neo Saban era. And I gotta realize, you know, also, not every Power Rangers piece of media is going to be perfect. No matter what they put out, it's just what it is, you know. And yeah, I love Mighty Morphin. I love the other seasons before I grew out of it a little bit. But I have to open up on the Neo Saban era, like how I gave when Saban's new run came out with Samurai through Super Ninja Steel. I gave the Disney seasons a chance because, again, personally, when I was a teenager, preteen teenager in the 2000s, 2 decades ago, I didn't like what Disney did with Power Rangers. But now I started to appreciate what Disney did with the series, even if they didn't care for it. I started to fully appreciate RPM, despite originally I was so cynical about RPM when it first came out, and then in the years after, the whole entire 99% of the fandom blew it up like it was the greatest thing. But it kind of was, and it was more mature and darker, which it was. But then once we went from having mature seasons to something more blast from the past, regressing sort of, but new age seasons like Samurai, Megaforce, and Ninja Steel and Dino Charge and so forth, I gotta realize not everything is going to be great the longer something that's been going on for so long comes out and stays on the air. Because Power Rangers when we're long gone, Power Rangers will still be here for new generations to pick up on it. And even heck, when the day comes when I'm gone, Power Rangers and this channel and everything I'm doing and everything I had done will still be here. So I have to accept that. So yeah, the hate talk I done with Saban and Bandai. Well, since those changes have been made, but now I'm going to regret spewing all that negativity and that hate I was saying about, you know, Ninja Steel and stuff. But even though when I do get the Ninja Steel DVDs and such, I'm going to still drudge through the season. But knowing I never saw it beforehand, even though I had to skip it because, you know, knowing again how I am about the Neo Saban era. Okay, now on to a point that I think would probably be pretty pointless in this video since I went on a bit too long with the second tangent. Okay, the third point, but I know this is going to feel pointless for some, but the third reason why I stopped doing this podcast is because due to the fact, again, tying to the fourth tangent when I get to it, is my Power Rangers Lost Galaxy fan film upbringing and constant mentions about the fan film, and as well as my personal life and past. If for anyone who has known me for 8, 9, how many years I've been doing this, when I used to do this podcast, you know, for the people who didn't give me a chance back then and still probably couldn't give me a chance now, but that's fine. That's okay. I was in the middle of my fan film thing of Power Rangers, but whenever I saw something that the official franchise, the official stuff was doing with the show, the toys, the movie, the comics, whatever, I was very cynical about those things. And I was, you know, and again, I was very, I was always about my fan film thing. And I got to realize, well, all that ranting and raving, and then when I bring up something I would do, but then I turn around and don't do it at all, that go to show how hypocritical I was and how two-faced I was in a way, too. So that's probably another factor why I stopped doing this. Plus, I had brought up so much about my personal life up to that point. Like, who wants to know what went on since 2011 onward up till 2018 at that point? That's why in 2019 and 2020, I was just like, stay in the dark. I don't want to talk about my personal life anymore and make things worse for me. I mean, I've talked so much about how when I did that, you know, that Trekina-centric fan film thing of PRLG and the fan films I've been doing afterward and the struggles doing it, and then what was going on in my last year in high school. And by the by, 2021 is my 10-year anniversary since I graduated from my high school of Gaithersburg High School, since I live in Maryland, Montgomery County, Maryland. And all the stuff that happened that time, I gotta stop talking about that. And that's something I need to do now for future episodes of this video series since I'm getting older and I'm turning 30. Anything else from my past, I'll save that stuff for the vlogs, because in the podcast I gotta be more concise of what Power Rangers and Sentai and whatever goes on in the fandom is doing, and what Hasbro or Autobot, G.I. Joe, Pony Overlords are doing with this franchise. I have to be more concise of what they're doing with that. I need to stop, you know, bringing up my personal life during the podcast, because no one cares about what went on 10 years ago, and especially now, no one cares about that. Back when we had the Neo Saban era and Sentai with Gokaiger and the Ninja and whatever, and then anything else Power Rangers and Sentai related, I mean, I gotta keep that personal life stuff to myself. Save that for when I'm on Facebook or on Instagram maybe. But when I'm on a platform where everyone is watching videos the most, that being a ubiquitous video platform like YouTube, no one, especially in the Power Rangers fandom, wants to hear about some guy in Gaithersburg, Maryland, talking about how he struggled making a Trekina-centric PRLG fan film that went nowhere. But I'll probably tell you why it didn't go nowhere. Again, it ties to my first tangent about the whole negative attitude, and also tied to my fourth tangent, which I'll get to in a second. And I realized I was acting, how I was back then, and how I was like, screw you, you don't care, this, screw you. See, I realized that made me look bad and made me look stupid, because I realized that's why I got blacklisted from ever joining Ranger Board to discuss anything. And whenever they were talking about fan film stuff, I got blacklisted. But unfortunately, someone in my family had to cover for me back then. And I've been trying to outcry Ranger Board for calling me out years ago about when they heard about this platform, this channel, me being on this platform and this channel about the fan film thing, saying I was being a troll and stuff. And when really, again, it ties to my first and fourth tangents when I get to that in the fifth one. And all the stuff that's been happening. And again, I was going through something personal. And I realized that's why I've been a massive train wreck. And if I'm going to do a Power Rangers fan film, even if I'm doing it by myself, do it. I'm telling myself that, actually. Because when I did Power Rangers Lost Galaxy 2014 and that Trakina fan film that's 3 hours long that I know people didn't want to hear about when other fan films came out at the time, I was, again, I was all over the place. I was conflicted with stuff, and I was trying to figure out what to do with my life before I turned 30. Because, yeah, I'm young. I'm 28, going on 29 at this time. I'm recording this, but I have to realize that what went on in my personal life and the whole, I did this in high school and I got in trouble for this and this is where I am now in life because of that, and based on my poor decisions and poor life choices since that event. I gotta stop bringing up about what went on in my personal life with family and friends. I have to realize my dad, he was all I had despite his problems, but I gotta keep that to myself now. So I can't keep saying it no more on YouTube because no one cares if I went through something like that. But if people heard about my personal family tragedy about a parent being dead and had passed away from a certain health issue or a certain addiction, well, yeah, people have to open up to that and have some curiosity and common courtesy, because realizing that it happened. But on to the fourth but biggest reason why I stopped doing this podcast series and how I was as a fan. And I'm trying to be honest. I'm being honest about this. I was being a toxic Power Rangers fan, and I was showing some sense of entitlement, boosting my ego. And it's not good. That's why I stopped doing this. But again, it all ties to the following tangents I brought up here. I was being egotistical and selfish and entitled, and this is what I'm trying to work on, is try to not to be that anymore, be that person anymore. Ever since COVID-19 last year, I had to change my error of ways with things, because as a Power Rangers fan, I was very toxic, but showing some entitled ego tripping, literally. And I acted like people would be like, "Oh, hail Anthony Marsh," when no one knows who I am or no one knows who I was. But see, I realized I was in a state where I acted like everyone should be all bow to me and be all like, but it's not like that. It shouldn't be like that. Because no one wants to be around someone who's that stuck up his mind about whatever with the franchise. And I realized I kind of did, this podcast, and why I stopped doing this initially is why I kind of let this semi-ruin Power Rangers for some people. And as a matter of fact, I ruined Power Rangers for myself because, again, this ties with the first and third tangents I brought up, where I was being negative and I was always bringing up about the fan film thing, and when it came to what was going on in the fandom with other people's fan projects. Because I have to admit that I was insecure. I was selfish and jealous and bitter, resentful, all of that negative. And I realized, what kind of Power Rangers fan am I for being that? And I realized that's why I had to stop, and that's why I had to go for a while. But here I am 3 years later, and just trying to re-kickstart where things went wrong and why I want to do better going forward. Because the stuff I was saying in the past, talking about how, Megaforce will never be as good as In Space and Lost Galaxy or whatever. I mean, I realized I was talking a bunch of egotistical stuff as a fan. Because again, I was in my early to mid 20s when I said that stuff. But now that as I'm winding down from this point in my life and onto the new, the new part of my life coming up, that being 30, I realized what kind of a toxic fanboy and entitled fan douchewad I was with Power Rangers and Super Sentai. I realized that's why my channel did suffer and died, because I realized that behavior was toxic. That's probably why that stuff I was saying in the past with, the 2017 movie and Megaforce and Power/Rangers and some other things that Power Rangers had done in the fandom or on the show or with the toys and stuff was very negative. And I have to admit, I have been severely nostalgia sick, much like anybody, so I'm no different. I was one of those fans who was so stuck in the 90s and early 2000s with Saban's original run. Because, nostalgia had been playing such a huge cue card for us. And nostalgia is ubiquitous. Just because once they bring something from the past back, and then it does trigger those days when some stuff was good. But I gotta realize that time is gone. And we got the DVDs of those seasons of Power Rangers already. We have the show on Netflix. Well, I'll talk about Netflix removing those seasons in the next 2 episodes after a certain video response to a Power Ranger YouTuber. Next episode. But it's just, I gotta realize that those series have not went anywhere. They're still around. They've never went away. Nothing goes away. So I gotta realize that sense of entitlement needed to stop. That entitlement of thinking the original Saban era is better than the new era of Power Ranger seasons. And I gotta realize that. But upon my rewatches of most of those older seasons, and yes, including the Disney seasons, I gotta realize, while I do adore the original Saban era, but I gotta realize the original Saban era had its faults too when I was growing up. Why do you think I had ripped on episodes of Power Rangers from the original Saban era? And while I overpraised it and why I had that entitlement, I gotta realize there were some episodes in the original Saban era and certain moments and points in the original era that was not good neither. For example, whenever I brought up Trakeena's revenge from Lightspeed Rescue, I would always say I hate Trakeena's revenge. But yet, I love Lost Galaxy, but hated the Lightspeed Rescue crossover when growing up, and then revisiting that episode now as an adult. Just because the original actress behind Trakeena didn't come back, all because whatever factors that us fans have claimed and assumed for years. Well, if I talk about some of those things in a future podcast about what her original actress originally said in the podcast, I'll bring up and sum up what she actually said word for word, and what she actually said of all I have to do is write down some things she did said in those interviews that she had been conducted from some fans about why she did not return for the Lightspeed Rescue crossover and things, but I don't understand why. Or episodes like the Ninja Turtles Next Mutation crossover with Power Rangers in Space. Yeah, I still don't like that team-up episode, but it's still part of Power Rangers. Or something that Mighty Morphin Season 2 did that pissed me off now as an adult. And I gotta realize, even in the older seasons, pre-Samurai onward. There have been times in Mighty Morphin through RPM that had some parts that pissed me off within Power Rangers, but it's still part of Power Rangers. So either accept it or just stop watching altogether for me. But that's where my ego and sense of entitlement as a fan came from. And I get it because of the whole nostalgia, and also have been coloring a lot of my opinions with the stuff. But I gotta accept it's part of Power Rangers. It happened. Whatever they did in episodes like Trakina's Revenge or Shell Shocked or Power Transfer, all that stuff, it happened. I have to let it go and accept it. I don't want to go on long enough, but for the fifth and final reason why I stopped this podcast, you probably already know about how constant I was with my unhealthy use of anger and profanity when venting over what I found objectionable within Power Rangers and Sentai and the fandom for both at large. Well, yeah, they do say, you know, there were a lot of things that I had said in the past in this podcast that I came off being really pissed off about for no apparent reason, and I had no right to be angry about that stuff. And even though I did set a bunch of F-bombs and, you know, saying fuck all the time and shit all the time with Power Rangers, but yeah, I'm an adult, but I have to realize when I'm talking about something that's for kids, but yes, us adults that were those kids and people of all ages still watch this stuff. And I realize all of that stuff I was saying is why I didn't get nowhere on YouTube. That's why my content had died. This video series died. Everything I had done died because of these 5 factors. I used so much profanity and anger when it was inappropriate, just because I was, you know, then me being entitled and being egotistical about Power Rangers and my fan film stuff and whatever. Then the fan film stuff in general and personal life bring-ups and upbringings. Then the stuff I said about Saban and Bandai and so forth with the stuff I said. And of course, the negativity. So what I've discussed over the last almost near an hour? My negativity, the stuff I felt that was hate speech to the following companies that no longer have hardly any involvement with Power Rangers except the network that's still airing the show today. The upbringings about my personal life and personal life problems, and also tied to the fandom, my enjoyment of the franchise within the fandom and my fan film projects, me being a toxic fan and being an egomaniac, and then the constant unhealthy use of profanity in my past videos. So going forward, I'm working on now, following this, is going to reduce that kind of stuff, and the more I keep up with this, then I'll get better with this. Because I realize, I hope you guys understand what happened going on, so I just don't want to keep you guys up for long. So that's all I had to say for the day, because I needed to get it out there, and I hope you guys understand why I stopped this video series and I want to start over. So let's just say I did a semi-reboot, and yeah, I know it's a word nobody likes, you know, when you reboot something that was done before, but, you know, do over again. Reboot where I did wrong. So anyway, guys, I hope you guys understood what had been going on and why I need to also come clean with what I had said before, because I was saying some really bad stuff and I had been a reckless Power Rangers fan and a YouTuber, so it's best I needed to stop the madness, literally. And I hope you guys understand, because I realized I was not in the bright mood of things at the time in the last decade. But now we're in a new decade, and I'm almost approaching my new decade of life with my new stage of life with turning 30. I gotta stop. I gotta put like I said before in a vlog in the past 2 years ago, I have to put the past behind me. I realized that, yeah, there were going to be consequences years later for the stuff I said and did. So anyway, guys, that's it for this episode. I hope you guys understood what went on, and I hope you guys understand what I tried to address for an hour. And I hope to see you guys next time with a new episode of this, for this revival of the Terra Venture podcast for the Power Rangers and Sentai fandoms and the fandom at large. And I'll see you guys next time. So this was Anthony on Power Rangers Lost of Galaxy fan film, formerly known as PR Lost of Galaxy 2014. And I'll see you guys next time with a brand new episode. And have a good night. And see you guys next time.